All right. So, hello and welcome, one and all, to yet another edition of Film Online. So today we are going to go over story structure lesson number 2, in which we will discuss log lines and movie genres. So last time we discussed the hero's journey and the monomyth. Now, the cool thing about the hero's journey and the monomyth is that it applies to all kinds of stories. It applies to films, but it also applies to TV episodes, and it also applies to books and any story that you've ever heard or told before in your entire life. It applies to mythology. It applies to everything. That's the kind of nice thing about the monomyth, is it encompasses all things. Today, we are going to continue our journey in story structure, but we are going to discuss strictly, we'll be discussing log lines and movie genres. And this is specific to film. This is specific to movies. Okay, today, everything we're talking about today are story structures that are specific to movies and films that you watch in a movie theater. Okay, and some television shows and things like that, but mostly today we're talking about movies. So whereas on Tuesday we talked about the sort of the broader story elements that make up all stories, today we'll be talking about story elements that are specific to our industry, specific to films. We're going to kind of get deeper and kind of more focused on our particular niche of storytelling, which of course is filmmaking. So today we'll be discussing log lines and movie genres. Everything that we talk about today is going to come basically from one source, from a guy named Blake Snyder. And Blake Snyder was a screenwriter in the Hollywood world, and he was well known, not really for his screenplays. He wrote plenty of screenplays, and he made his living as a screenwriter. But what he's really known for is being the author of this book. And it is a book. I don't know if you can see it on my screen right now because I put up the screen share. Can you guys see me? Yeah? Okay, cool. I'll make it real quick, make it large here. So this book right here, Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. It's a short book. It's an easy read. It's kind of fun. There's like humor involved in it. You could read it in like a day or two if you really wanted to. But this book is very well known in the film industry. It's a book written for writers who want to be screenwriters. So it's oftentimes used in colleges and in education programs and things like that. And with this book, with Blake Snyder's ideas, you kind of either love them or you hate them. And in the industry, like if you polled people in Hollywood, you'd probably get like 90% of people that are like, yeah, this is a great book and you should read this book. And then you probably get 10% of the people who are like, I hate that book. That book is the worst. Blake Snyder's ideas are horrible and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's important to understand the audience to which he is writing. He's writing to writers who are aspiring screenwriters. He's not writing really to professionals. He's writing to people who want to be screenwriters, but who also have skill at being a writer. He's not writing to the novice. He's writing to people who have some skill at being a writer, but maybe don't know how to put together an effective screenplay. Everything he talks about is about telling a story effectively by using different story structuring formats. So the 10% of people who really hate his ideas are the kind of people that say, well, you can't put my ideas in a box, man. Like you can't, I want to be creative. I want to break the rules. I want to break the conventions. And I think if Blake Snyder were here, he's since passed away, bless his soul. But I think if he was here, he would probably tell you what I'm going to tell you, which is these ideas are ideas to get you started. These are ideas that are studied and based on what has been successful in the past. These ideas are kind of the rules for what makes an effective story. That doesn't mean you can't break the rules at some point, but you need to understand the rules in order to know when to break them effectively. Okay? And all of us, we are all new screenwriters. None of us have sold a screenplay and made a whole bunch of money from it. None of us are making a living at being a screenwriter. So I would suggest that we follow his ideas so that we get to know the rules, because we all need to understand the rules before we can start breaking the rules and doing something different. The criticism against some of his ideas are like, oh, well, his ideas are like a roadmap. That's why all our movies are very formulaic. That's why a lot of our movies are the same, so on and so forth. And this is actually his argument. his argument is that all movies have one kind of a story structure. Like every movie can be categorized into one of these types of story structures, and that's why they are effective. So there's a nice like tug and pull there, right? Like you need to understand like the difference between learning the rules and using the rules to your advantage, and learning the rules and knowing when to break the rules and still having a successful story. So we're going to start with the basics, and we're going to start with these basic rules so that we understand how to write an effective screenplay and how to be successful at doing so. So story structure, lesson 2, log lines and movie genres, from our friend Blake Snyder and his book, Save the Cat. I have a few copies of that book, by the way. If that's a book that interests you, you want to get really into screenwriting and you like these ideas after class and you want to get more into it, I'm sure you could find it online. I'm sure you could probably get it for cheap, but I actually do have a few hard copies. I have, I think, 4 or 5. You're welcome to come and check one out from me if that's something that you are inclined to do. All right, so first, you got this great idea for a movie. You're all excited about it. You're all excited to tell your friend, I got this great idea for a movie. And your friend will say to you, okay, what is it? This is the first question when anyone asks about your film idea. Okay, what is it? What is it? How do you answer this question? You know, do you go off and tell the whole story from start to finish and while your friend sits there as a captive audience for an hour? Or do you kind of give the basics? So how do you describe a movie that you haven't written yet? And how do you answer that question? What is it? How do you do that? So the argument that Blake Snyder gives, and it's a good one, is that you need to understand your idea well enough that you can answer this question in a brief, succinct amount of time. Otherwise, maybe your story is a little too complicated. Maybe your story is a little too complex, or maybe you just haven't really figured out your story in its entirety yet. Maybe you're still trying to play around with it and you haven't really narrowed it down to, you know, its roots. So what is it? So be thinking about that question as we go through this lesson today. Be thinking about your movie and ask yourself in the back of your mind, as some of the things that we're discussing, what is it? What is your movie? Because we're going to kind of get into the different kinds of structures, and you're going to start to notice where you can start categorizing your film idea and how your film idea consists of some of these structures that will help you as you begin writing it. So for starters, to answer that question, what is it? I suggest that you come up with what's called a log line. So a log line is a one-line description of your film, okay? The goal is to be able to take your whole idea, your whole concept for your movie, and narrow it down to one sentence, to one clear, succinct sentence. If you can do that, you probably have a good idea, or at least you have an idea that you thought a lot about and that you can present clearly, and it's focused. If you can't do that, maybe your idea still needs some more development before you're ready to pitch it. Maybe you haven't really got a clear vision for what story you want to tell just yet. So you want to come up with a log line, a one-line description for your film. This could be a really helpful exercise, not just to help you write, but also to help you as you prepare to pitch. Because sometimes you have a really limited amount of time with that big hotshot producer, and you want to pitch your idea, and you got 30 seconds, and they're just walking to their car, and you say one sentence, and they might turn to you and say, okay, I'm intrigued. Why don't you set up an appointment and come to my office next week? And now all of a sudden you have an opportunity to really pitch your idea and to really sell your idea for millions of dollars. Okay? So a one-line description of your film. So here's an example. A newly married couple must spend Christmas Day at each of their 4 divorced parents' homes. That's a film called 4 Christmases. Okay? Pretty clear. I can see that. I understand what that story is going to be about. Okay? A just hired employee goes on a company weekend and soon discovers someone's trying to kill him. From a movie called The Retreat. A risk-averse teacher plans on marrying his dream girl, but must first accompany his overprotective future brother-in-law, a cop, on a ride-along from hell. From a movie called Ride Along. Okay? One sentence, and it explains everything about that movie and boils it down to one simple, easy-to-read, easy-to-digest concept. Okay? So what makes a good log line? How do these why are these log lines effective? Like what's the point and what makes a good log line? Well, the point is to kind of grab your audience, right? The point is to try to boil down your idea into a simple concept so that you can write around it and build off of that and stay focused on that particular idea. So there's a lot of things that make a good, effective logline. You need some irony, some humor, perhaps. Okay? You want to be able to create a mental picture. I want to be able to see it in my head when you say your logline. Okay? For producers and for people that you might be collaborating with, they need to understand just from your logline who the film is intended for. Okay, who's your film intended for? How much is it going to cost? This is a big deal to someone that you might collaborate with because they might have to invest some money or find ways to invest money into your film. Do you have the resources to create the film that you are pitching? Okay, so a good logline will help a producer know exactly how much they need to spend on your film. Okay, and it helps to have a real killer title, what Blake Snyder calls a killer title, almost like a mini logline in and of itself. So irony. So an irony hooks your interest. It grabs your audience, right? It makes me want to know more. I am intrigued. Tell me more, right? If a good logline will make me nod and say, yeah, okay, I'd watch that movie. I'm curious about seeing more about this. Okay, so for example, a cop comes to LA to visit his estranged wife, and her office building is taken over by terrorists. This is, of course, the amazing holiday Christmas film Die Hard, which is a classic holiday favorite of so many, right? But there's some irony here, right? A cop comes to LA to visit his estranged wife, normal, regular old holiday thing, and then the building's taken over by terrorists. It's like, what? What are the odds? How does this happen? Right? I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by this. There's some irony there. Like, that's not what I was expecting when you opened up this logline, when I opened up this movie, right? A businessman falls in love with a hooker he hires to be his date for the weekend. That's the logline from Pretty Woman, right? Julia Roberts, right? Okay, there's some irony there, right? I think it's Richard Gere, right? Richard Gere hires a hooker for the weekend and he falls in love, right? There's some irony there. That's not what we were expecting. It's not what Richard Gere was expecting. Okay, not what Julia Roberts was expecting. Okay. You want to be able to create a mental picture. Can you see the movie in your head? More importantly, can other people that you're pitching the idea to see the movie in their head? Can the producer that you're trying to get to green light your project, can the producer see the movie in their head? Okay, you want visuals inside people's head. I want to be able to visualize what's going on. It's like seeing the movie poster. Can I see the movie poster? Okay. A risk-averse teacher, this is the ride-along logline. A risk-averse teacher plans on marrying his dream girl, but must first accompany his overprotective future brother-in-law, a cop, on a ride-along from hell. Okay, well, a risk-averse teacher. What kind of a teacher? A risk-averse teacher. Okay, who is he trying to marry? Not just a girl, his dream girl. Right? Do you hear the adjectives that are being used? Okay, what kind of a person is his brother-in-law? An overprotective brother-in-law. An overprotective cop of a brother-in-law. Okay? So these are real descriptive words that you can use to really tell this story and to really explain your logline that's being put out there. Okay? She's the perfect woman until she has a drink, from a movie called Blind Date. Okay? And these are all loglines, official loglines that were pulled from Save the Cat. Okay? She's the perfect woman until she has a drink. Okay, so there's a visual image there, right? Like what is going on there? Like, I'm intrigued. Like, I want to know more. Like, I'm imagining I can see a couple at a dinner date, and I can see things happening in different ways. Just like I can see the ride along. I can see the ride along happening. It's the ride along from hell, and crazy things are happening, right? So can you create a mental picture for your logline? The audience and the cost, okay? Film, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't figured it out yet, film is a business. Sometimes we scoff our nose at that and say, no, but I am a true artist. I am a true artist, and I am a cinematic master, and I'm going to make a real artistic film, and it's going to change the world, and people are going to feel things and all this kind of stuff. That's great. That's very noble. But I'm sorry, film is a business. Film is a business. This is a career technical education class. I'm teaching you skills that can help you make money. Okay, that's not a bad thing. because you need to survive. you need to feed your family someday. You don't want to live at home for the rest of your life. Okay. So a movie studio is there as a business. They are there to make a profit, all right? They need to figure out how to attract studio buyers. A good, effective log line will give a producer on the business side of the film industry an idea of how much money do they need to spend to make your movie. Is it worth it? Who are they going to market it to? Who is the intended audience? Can they effectively market it to that audience so that they can turn a profit, so that is a profitable venture, so they can continue to make money? And if you're a filmmaker, this is how eventually you get to make that beautiful, wonderful artistic film that you're hoping to make, right? You need to sell enough profitable films that you make enough money that then you can do your passion project and you can make those great, beautiful artistic films that you have visions about. Okay, but you can't do that if you're not successful as a career. That's just the way it is, right? We all got to eat, right? Okay, so can you do that in your log line? Can you show the audience? Can you show the producer who the audience is and how much it's going to cost? So, for example, the 4 Christmases log line, a newly married couple must spend Christmas Day at each of their 4 divorced parents' homes. As a producer, I could look at that and I could say, oh, okay, I'm going to need a certain number of actors and I'm going to need a certain number of locations. I could get 4 homes on the same block, so we don't have to move around a whole lot. And then I could pretend that those houses are across town and we'll get a team to shoot some B-roll in between for travel. That leaves us with enough money to hire one big name. So maybe I'll get like George Clooney or something. And then he'll bring in a lot of money for revenue. I can make this movie for cheap. This is going to be profitable. That's what a producer is thinking when you pitch them your idea in the industry, because it is a business. It is a business. Okay. So does your log line tell people who your film is intended for? When I see a newly married couple must spend Christmas Day at each of their 4 divorced parents' homes, I haven't seen this film. It sounds to me like a good date movie. It sounds to me like maybe it could be a family film. Maybe. There's families that are being involved. Okay. There's not a lot of special effects. I know it's not going to cost a lot of money. Okay. So I know as a producer who I need to market that towards. And in the industry, they divide up the marketing into demographics. They typically do it by age and they typically do it by gender. And they're trying to figure out, okay, well, we're trying to market this film to people under the age of 25, or we're trying to market this film to people over 30 or something like that. Once in a while, you get a film that is called high concept. And a high concept film means that it hits all demographics. Everybody wants to see this movie. Those are the big blockbusters. Those are the ones that make a ton of money. And it's great to be a high concept film that everybody wants to see. However, it can also be a challenge. Sometimes films try to appeal to everyone. And when they try to appeal to everyone, sometimes it means they end up appealing to no one, right? So you have to be a little bit careful with that as a writer. Do you really have a high concept idea, or do you have an idea that's really geared towards a particular audience, which is fine, but you're trying to turn it into a high concept idea? And then you might risk losing the intended audience that you had all along. So it's something that you have to think about as a writer, something that you have to consider, okay? A killer title. Does your movie have a killer title? Okay. A killer title is basically a Loglines logline. It's a really short version of your logline. So a logline is one sentence of your whole movie, and a title is one line of your logline. And it boils down your entire movie into one simple concept. This can really help you focus your idea and know if you have something that's going to work. So the killer title has everything that the logline has. It's just a title. It's got the irony. It says what it is. It tells the story. Okay. So a movie like Legally Blonde. So in the book, Save the Cat, he uses the example Legally Blonde quite a bit. And if you haven't seen Legally Blonde, you should. It's a really good movie. Legally Blonde, but it says what it is. It says what it is, right? I understand it's a legal film. I understand there's some kind of stereotype there about blondes, right? Okay, so I can kind of picture about maybe what's going on there. Okay, so Legally Blonde. And there's a play on words, right? That's a play on words as well. So maybe it's a little bit humorous. Okay, and that's a lot about what the movie is right there, just from the title. Ride along. It's a ride along. It is what it is. But also, we, the audience, are going to be riding along with the film. Right? So it's a ride along. Come ride along, right? Okay. 4 Christmases. Not a lot of irony there. Not a lot of humor there, but it certainly tells me exactly what it is. I can certainly envision in my head what it is. It's 4 Christmases. It says what it is, right? Nuclear family. There's a play on words. A nuclear family, right? I'm curious about this. Is this a family of superheroes? Like, are they gonna be exposed to like nuclear stuff and something weird is gonna happen to them? Okay, I'm intrigued. Die Hard. It's hard for him to die. Die hard. Like, that's what the movie is. It's really hard for him to die, right? Okay, so a good title can really do all of those things. So ask yourself, what is your log line? What is your log line? You're all going to pitch an idea next week. What is your log line? So we're going to take a couple minutes here. I want you to think about your movie. I want you to think about your idea. And I want you to come up with a log line for your film and a title if you can. Okay, so take a couple minutes. You can write it down. You can type it into your phone, or you can type it on your computer, or write it down on a Post-it note or something like that. And I'll just pick some random people to call on. So be ready. But think about a log line, one sentence that helps boil down your whole movie into its basic core. Okay, you want irony. You want maybe a little bit of humor in there. You want to say what it is. I want to be able to see in my head what your movie is, a good mental picture. Will it be able to tell me who the film is intended for, who the audience is for, how much it might cost? Right? Try to hit all of those things with your log line. If you can come up with the title, even better. Okay, so go ahead and take a few minutes. I'll give you a couple minutes. Go ahead and write something down. Think about your movie. You about ready? I'm going to call on some people. I'm just going to randomly look at my screen here. Akand, my eyes saw you on my screen first. You're prominently displayed at the moment.
Yeah.
Tell us your log line.
A discontent 20-something learns the secret to immortality, but he soon finds that death is the only true escape.
I'm intrigued. That's good. That's good. You have a title?
Not quite. Something to do with death and freedom, though.
Okay. That's good. That's pretty good. Oswaldo, how about you?
A unwanted man what was the pitch? A undiscovered man goes on a journey to discover who was the last victim in the latest explosion in the tunnels.
Okay, so a man goes to discover who the latest victim was in an explosion in the tunnels. Okay, that's good. We can work with that. You'll want to use some more descriptive words, like what kind of a man is he? You said he was unwanted, or
like undisclosed, like a
mystery
very
guy.
Mystery guy.
Okay. That helps me know a little bit more about him. So yeah, good adjectives like that can help kind of portray a character and help us understand kind of what the film is about a little bit more. Akshar, how about you?
A man follows the trail of revenge to avenge the death of his wife.
Okay. What kind of a man?
A kind, wholesome man.
Oh, see, that totally changes the mental picture that I had in my head. That totally changes things. So see how that can really make a difference. Lisa, how about you?
I'm not done making mine.
Not done, not finished. Can you tell us what you have so far?
A shy young woman picks up a mysterious hitchhiker on the road and has to decide if she'll follow her original plans.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So she's shy, and what was the other one? She's shy and what?
A shy young woman.
Oh, she's a shy young woman. Okay, cool. Okay, good. Do you have a title or no? Not yet. Anyone want to share theirs? Anyone is super excited? They just are dying to share their log line? Go for it, Aman. Go ahead. You'll be our last one. Go ahead.
So 2 dogs fall in love in a adoption center, and then one of them ends up with a drug smuggler, and one of them ends up being an airport security dog. And
So can you write that into one clear sentence? One sentence.
Okay. An airport security dog falls in love with the dog of a drug smuggler
I like
in
it.
the airport.
I like it. And the title?
I don't know.
Dude, come on. This is an easy one. Puppy Love.
Sure.
It's Puppy Love.
That works. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. So we will talk more about loglines after next week when we hit story structure lesson 3, when we talk about screenwriting. But you all need a logline when you pitch your idea next week. You all need a logline. A title would be great as well, but I'm requiring a logline. Okay, so make sure you have a logline. So you start with your logline, and then you will proceed with your pitch. So make sure that you are prepared for that. It is part of your grade. You need a logline for your pitch. All right, so continuing onward then. We will now shift gears a little bit. We've gone from the logline chapter of Save the Cat to the movie genres chapter of Save the Cat, which is really the bulk of the book, and really what Blake Snyder is really famous for is his analysis of movie genres. Now, when you hear movie genres, I'm not talking about like, oh, this is a Western movie, or oh, this is a science fiction movie, or this is a romantic comedy. Like that's a different kind of genre. What we are talking about is story structure genres, okay? The scaffolding that the story is built upon, okay? Because all these films are constructed in a certain type of way. And we are analyzing the construction, not the story, the construction of that story, the way that story is built. And Blake Snyder says that all these films all fit into one of these kinds of genres. So here's a quote from Blake from the book, from Save the Cat. And I really like this quote. I think it kind of boils down everything into a nice, good soundbite. It says, "Listen to Spielberg or Scorsese talk about movies. They know and can quote from hundreds. And I don't mean quote as in recite lines from. I mean quote as in explain how each movie works. Movies are intricately made emotion machines." I love that line. I love that line. That is a really fancy way of saying what I have been telling you since the beginning of junior year, which is great filmmakers are great manipulators, right? They get our audience to feel what we want them to feel, to think what they want them to think, and so on and so forth, okay? Blake Snyder says the same thing. Movies are intricately made emotion machines. They are Swiss watches of precise gears and spinning wheels that make them tick. You have to be able to take them apart and put them back together again in the dark, in your sleep. And your knowledge of a few movies is not enough. It is also not enough to know all of the movies of the past 5 years. You have to go back, see the lineage of many types of movies, know what movies begat what in the line of succession, and how the art was advanced by each. True originality can't begin until you know what you're breaking from. I like this a lot. Blake Snyder puts us all in our place. I like this a lot. This is why if you're a film major in college, you have to take film history. You have to take film analysis. But I just want to make movies. Yeah, well, you have to learn how movies have been made for the last century. But I'm not making a black and white, boring, silent film. It doesn't matter. This is your art form. You need to learn how your art form has progressed throughout time. And why these stories were effective 100 years ago. Because storytelling hasn't changed. The technology has, the art form has, but telling a story hasn't. And these structures have existed for millennia. Okay, just like we learned the other day with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and the monomyth. All right, so Blake Snyder says in his book, and this is a big premise of his book, he says every movie that you've ever watched can be categorized into one of 10 movie genres. One of 10 movie genre types. He says there are 10 movie genre types, and that's it. Every movie that you've ever seen is scaffolded in one of these types, at least every successful movie, every movie that's good that we want to watch. Okay, the idea is that you learn how to develop your story and build around one of these types of scaffoldings. Okay, and this is what they are. You've got the monster in the house, the golden fleece, out of the bottle, dude with a problem, Rites of Passage, Buddy Love, The WHYDUNIT, The Fool Triumphant, Institutionalized, and finally, everyone's favorite, The Superhero. These are the 10 movie genres. Every movie that you've watched, every good movie, every successful movie that you've watched can be fit into one of these categories. And we're not talking about the story. We're talking about the structure of the story, the beneath the story, the way the story was written, the scaffolding that supports the story. So what we're going to do is I have all these slides and that explains all of these, but rather than just have me keep talking and go over all of these one by one, I'm going to have you go through them and teach them to the class, because that way at the end of the day, at least you know one of them really, really well, right? So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and most of you are going to be by yourself because there's only 12 of you and there's 10 of these, but a couple of you, or one of you, I guess, will have a partner. So I just don't know who that's going to be. The computer's going to choose. It's going to be random. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you chapter 2 from Save the Cat. So I'm typing that in right now. Film Seniors PM. It's already shared with you, but I need to reshare it so that it goes to your email. Film Seniors PM. Okay, so you now have in your email chapter 2. And what you're going to do is, based on which room you're assigned to, you are going to read up on yours, on the one that you were going to learn about. And then when we're done with the breakout rooms, you'll come back and we'll go through these one by one, and you will teach us, you will instruct us in what you have learned. Have some examples of movies that fall into these categories so that we can understand it a little bit better. And then we'll kind of go through it, and then we'll have a good, richer understanding that way, because you'll have an opportunity to teach it to the class. Okay, everyone get that email? Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. So here we go. Breakout rooms. I need 10 rooms. Create the rooms. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, that looks fine. 10 rooms. There we go. All right, here we go. Ready? Boom. The rooms have been prepared. All right, looks like we're almost all here. And we're all here. Excellent. All right, so I will share my slides so that I can follow along with whomever is teaching. And up first, looks like we've got Monster in the House group. So group number 1.
Yeah, so Monster in the House was me and Aman. And like the main thing for this genre is that it's very like primal. Snyder says that it's one of the first stories that have ever been told. It's basically the idea that you have people in a sort of confined space with a monster, and it's don't get eaten. So they have to run and hide from the monster, and they have to figure out some way to defeat the monster. Yeah, don't die.
Don't die.
Some famous examples include Scream, Tremors, Jaws, and of course Jurassic Park. And he has some rules for this genre. The first rule is that there has to be a confined space. So for example, in Jurassic Park, it's like the theme park. In Jaws, it's just like the beach town. In Alien, it's the spaceship. So there has to be a confined space. There has to be a sin that's been committed to make things interesting, I guess. So like in Jurassic Park, it would be like the dude, I forgot what his name was. He was too greedy and ignored like all the safety issues.
Spared no expense.
Spared no expense. Yeah. And then there's the run and hide element has to be there. So you have, it has to be like a big bad, like a big scary thing that like the characters have to run and hide from it. And then the fourth is it must like break away and do something fresh from like the rest of the genre, because since this is such an old story, he cites like one of the first examples as being like the myth of the Minotaur from ancient Greece. Mm-hmm. He says that you must break away and try and do something fresh. And one example of okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, Aman, do you want to talk about arachnophobia?
Oh yeah. So one example of some movie that did not do this right was anarchophobia, or Yeah, it's like the Fear of Spiders, I think.
Mhm.
And the movie basically had a lot of open space, so the characters could just leave. And the monster wasn't that scary to begin with. It was just like a spider, a big spider. So that's what Blake Snyder says. That movie did not do well. So it's really important to have like followed the rules um, of having confined spaces and a good like monster.
Okay, so to recap, don't die. We don't want to die. Someone or something is after our characters. This is usually in a confined space, as Akan pointed out. In Jurassic Park, you've got the island, and Jaws, you've got the ocean, and Tremors, you've got the desert. Just somewhere where they cannot get away. They're trapped. This is every horror movie ever, right? There's someone in the house. There's someone in the house, right? And you can't escape. And then oftentimes, this is the part that Akan mentioned briefly, oftentimes there's some type of sin that they are paying for. So this is in Jurassic Park, for example. If you've seen the movie, the first person to get eaten was the horrible lawyer that was all for breaking all the rules of nature and all that kind of stuff. And he gets eaten because he gets what he deserves. And we don't feel so bad when he gets eaten because he kind of deserved it, right? And in a lot of these horror movies and a lot of these monster movies, oftentimes someone gets eaten or someone gets destroyed or someone gets killed, and they oftentimes, they don't really deserve it. Like in the real world sense, they would never deserve it, but in the story structure sense, they did something wrong in Act 1, and that's why they end up dead. Because they did something wrong. There's some misbehavior. There's some sin, quote, sin that they're paying for. All right, Golden Fleece, group number 2.
Golden Fleece was me and Elisa. What Golden Fleece is basically there's a hero in the story who has an end goal, and throughout the movie he has missions and tasks to complete, but the end goal isn't really what surprises the entire movie and what is based on the entire thing. It's what he learns at the end, and he discovers something bigger than the end goal, which is himself and a character he develops. And a line that really stood out from what I was reading was at the end of paragraph 4. It says, "It's not the incidents, it's what makes the hero learn about himself from those incidents that makes the story work." And I thought that was pretty interesting. And Alicia is going to talk about the movies and examples because I haven't watched none of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so some famous examples of Golden Fleece movies are Back to the Future, Star Wars, and The Wizard of Oz, because in all of these movies, the main characters have an end goal that they want to attain, but at the end of the movie, they end up learning more about themselves, and the incidents that they go through were overall more important than their beginning goal that they had.
Excellent. So Golden Fleeces, to recap, oftentimes are quest stories. There's somebody's after a treasure. There's usually a team of characters, not always, but it's usually a team of characters, so they can kind of play off of each other. They're seeking some kind of prize at the end. And those were good examples. Star Wars, Wizard of Oz, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones. These are a lot of the movie posters on my wall because I'm a sucker for a Golden Fleece. I like Golden Fleeces. And as we learned from story structure lesson number 1, we just like the same story over and over and over again. We just like to package it differently. And those stories all follow the same story structure patterns. They all have the same bits of scaffolding. But the stories are all very different, and yet they're all very much the same genre. So good stuff. All right, out of the bottle, number 3. Who's doing number 3?
So that was me and Rye.
Okay.
So for out of the bottle, there are kind of 2 components that go into it. So one is like a wish fulfillment situation, like a, what if, and then something goes horribly wrong. So my example for that was Flubber, where Robin Williams, it mentioned in the chapter, Robin Williams wants to make his basketball team actually do things. So he invents a thingy that makes them jump really high. Oh no, something went wrong. Shouldn't have done that. And then the other one is a get what you deserve kind of narrative, where something happens to someone because they need to learn a lesson from it. So 17 again, Matthew Perry has to learn to relate to his children, and he does that by turning into Zac Efron.
Or Freaky Friday, when
Freaky
they
Friday,
switch
yeah.
places with their parents.
Good. Good. This is good. So to recap, out of the bottle, it's oftentimes a piece of magic, or like a wish, or some type of curse, or something like that. And oftentimes there's a lesson at the end, as Leah pointed out. We wish for something, and then we get it, and then it's not what it's cracked up to be, and then we learn our lesson, and that we were better off, and all we needed was to be ourselves at the beginning, or something like that, right? That you've seen this story before. This is like every after-school special known to man, right? This is also like every Jim Carrey movie of the 90s,
Yeah.
right? Like Liar Liar, The Mask, Bruce Almighty, right? Like so on and so forth. This is a formula that actually has worked very, very well in our freestyle films, because it lends itself very well to the amount of time that you have. An 8 to 10 minute film is a perfect amount of time to set up and pay off this particular type of story structure. So we've actually had a number of these that have been very successful and that have worked quite well. So it's one that I've seen here in class quite a bit. But those are all excellent examples. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry about that. No, but do you know any good like out of the bottle with like curses, just like flat out curses instead of wishes?
Wish upon.
Oh my god.
Curses instead of wishes. Curses. I mean, nothing comes to mind off the top of my head. I'm sure there are plenty.
Okay.
I'm sure we could use the Google machine and figure that one out. Let's keep moving, because we got a lot to get through here. Dude with a problem. Who's doing dude with a problem?
That was me.
All right.
So Dude with a Problem is about an average guy in extraordinary circumstances. So you have your stereotypical average Joe, which is supposed to help the audience relate to him, because like your average person is your average person, and they're supposed to be put in like the most basic and primal situations. So for example, like saving a kidnapped wife, or saving your friends who are being taken away by the Nazis, for example, from Schindler's List. So, and because of these like problems, you are forced to side with the average guy, because it seems so much like the viewer themselves. And regardless of how small the problem is, the victor will always come out. The main character will always be the victor, seeing that they will use their own individuality to show how they may be ordinary, but not quite the same as everyone else.
Sure. It's kind of like the triumph of the little guy.
Yeah. And famous examples include Die Hard, Schindler's List, and The Terminator.
Good. So to recap, an ordinary character, so we can relate to them, right? Because we want to be able to connect with that main character as an audience. So an ordinary character who's thrust into an extraordinary situation. So Die Hard, we read that logline earlier, right? Like he's just a guy trying to meet his wife and kind of make up with her, right? And then her building's taken over by terrorists, right? Like, what are the odds, right? It's a dude with a problem, as Blake Snyder says. It's a dude and a problem. So extraordinary situation, but an everyman, quote, everyman. So someone who has to deal with that extraordinary situation, and they're normal, just like us, just like you or me. Okay, rites of passage. This is kind of a tricky one. Who's got rites of passage? So is group number 5? Is it no 5?
Oh, wait, that might have been me, and I missed it, and I accidentally did the Buddy Love one.
Who's doing Buddy Love?
Me. I'm doing Buddy Love.
Yeah, I messed up. I'm
Oh
sorry.
boy, Carson messed up. Carson. Well, I guess I'm doing rites of passage then. So, rites of passage. Character faces life problems. Doesn't that sound fun? Life problems. These are often coming of age stories. We attempt to fix the problems, but then we eventually just sort of accept that the problems are there, and that's just always the way it's going to be. And that's what a rites of passage is. So, for example, we had like dude with a problem who was like ordinary person with extraordinary circumstances. Rites of passage is kind of like problems that everybody might experience at some point in their life. And then we try to fix it in extraordinary ways, but we can't, because those problems exist. So for example, this is like films about people who are dealing with death, whether like it's in the family or whether it's like someone who like discovers that they're going to die, right? Like that can be a rites of passage film. It could be somebody who's going through a breakup or a divorce or something like that. Like that could be a rites of passage film. It could be about a child whose parents are separating, or about a child whose family's moving to like a new place and they try to stop the family from moving, but eventually they accept that the family is going to move and they learn that it's not so bad at the end. We've actually had that film in a freestyle film not that long ago. So eventually they surrender and accept the change. They realize that this is part of life and that we all have to deal with hard things, and that if we face them head on and instead of trying to run away from them or change it or something like that, if we face it, we can kind of move on and kind of deal with it. In some ways it kind of utilizes the 6 stages of grief. You guys know about that? Is it 6? The 6 stages of grief?
Isn't 5?
Is it 5? 5 stages of grief? So oftentimes you'll see those 5 stages actually written into the films like this, and they incorporate those because it becomes relatable and we experience it with the people that are going through these types of films. All right, buddy love. I guess I got 2 of you.
Yeah. Okay. Buddy Love is a story about buddies in which at first they dislike each other, but then they grow to realize that they need each other and that they're 2 halves of a whole, which can also lead, this realization can lead to more conflict too.
I could give examples then, I guess.
Yeah, go for it.
Some examples of this is Finding Nemo, 48 Hours, and then Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Okay.
So to recap, this is often a friendship story where character is incomplete without the other. They're incomplete without the other. This is oftentimes romantic stories. This is like every romantic comedy that you've ever seen, right? Where like the 2 characters hate each other at the beginning, and then eventually they just love each other by the end, right? Like you've seen that a million times, right? That's a buddy love, right? But this can also work with like pet stories, like Air Bud. Remember Air Bud? Did you guys ever watch Air Bud when you were a kid? Like the golden retriever plays basketball and stuff. Right? That it can be what's the one with Owen Wilson and his dog? Marley and Me, right? So like it can be a pet story. It doesn't have to be like 2 people. Finding Nemo is a good example, but Finding Nemo is also a golden fleece, right? A team of characters that are trying to reach a certain objective and find a treasure at the end, right? Like so Finding Nemo is a little bit of both. It's a buddy love and it's a golden fleece. We call that a buddy fleece. All right. So sometimes movies can do a little bit of multiple genres. Buddy loves and golden fleeces actually go well together because we've already established that golden fleeces oftentimes have teams of characters. So you can sometimes incorporate 2 of these at the same time because buddy loves story beats actually match up well with the story beats of a golden fleece. All right. The WHYDUNIT.
Okay, so Why Done It is not focused on the action of the story, but more so why they're doing the action. It's like the motivation rather than the identity of the character. It's not really about like the hero changing, it's more about human nature, and it makes the audience like observe and sift out information and reflect on their own human nature. It can be anything from a detective story to like a social drama. It just has to go to the dark side. And then some examples are Citizen Kane, The Insider, Chinatown, Twin Peaks, and JFK.
Good. Very good. So WHYDUNIT, we oftentimes associate with mysteries, right? But it's not really about the mystery, as Teresa said. It's not really about finding out who did it. It's more about the psychological element as we uncover these dark secrets, right? The why is more interesting than the who. So a lot of film noir films, if you ever watched old film noir films, do this kind of thing. Modern films, Teresa named a bunch that maybe you may or may not have seen. Shutter Island is one that I think about that maybe you've seen. That stars Leonardo DiCaprio. Like that's a really good example of a WHYDUNIT. Veronica Mars is a lot of WHYDUNITs. So stuff like that, where we're trying the psychological element, as Teresa pointed out, the psychological element is more interesting. The uncovering of the dark why is more interesting and more about the story than just figuring out who the culprit is. Okay. All right. The Fool, Triumphant.
Hi, that was me.
Okay.
So the Fool Triumphant is typically, or a quick history lesson was that it started off with the black and white humor films with Charlie Chaplin and stuff, where it'd be a kind of clumsy and idiotic kind of guy who just sort of casually and accidentally messes things up and ends up uh, the hero of the story. And then the Fool Triumphant is like the ultimate underdog story where it's a weirdo in a world of normal people. And the example that they use that I like the best is Forrest Gump, where Forrest Gump is this sort of bizarre character compared to everyone else, and he's sort of looked down upon. And then the Fool Triumphant also normally has a sort of connection to the normal people type character, where that normal-ish person thinks the fool is like lucky to be getting away with all the stuff he's getting away with, and later realizes that it was foolish of him to want to change him. So that would be like Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah, good. So the Fool Triumphant, this is, as Evan pointed out, the ultimate underdog or fool character, and it does stem all the way back to Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, like all these famous physically, like they had no dialogue, so they did physical comedy, physical stunts and things like that, and they were oftentimes getting into trouble and not realizing they were in trouble, and then coming out ahead somehow, some way, and not even realizing it sometimes, perhaps. So that was a very common character trope that was used way back when in the early days of film. Oftentimes there's an institution or something to fight against, and the fool may not even know they're fighting against it. They might just be going about their lives and undermining it without even realizing what it is that they're doing. And in the end, we often learn, like we do so often in life, that the fool was the wisest among us all. So those are some good examples. The example that I think of often is a lot of characters that Bill Murray plays. There's a really good example in What About Bob? So if you've ever seen What About Bob, like that's a really good example of a fool triumphant. It's also a really funny movie, especially if you like psychology and stuff like that. Like there's some funny psychology humor in there, and Bill Murray's a funny guy. Okay, institutionalized, a tricky one.
Okay, so institutionalized was like about groups, institutions, or families, not like necessarily an actual family, just like a group of people working together like a family. And it was referred to as primal because like you lose a part of yourself when you become a part of the group, and you're working more towards the common goal than I guess for like yourself. And the institutionalized movies generally are like about a newcomer or like someone breaking away from the mentality of the group, and it's like referred to as who's more crazy, the group or myself. And it the way that the movies end is generally in a more shocking way. I don't know. I don't know how to explain that.
Can you give us some examples, some movie examples?
Yeah, so The Godfather or Animal House or like American Beauty are some movies that have the institutionalized genre.
Okay, good. I would add One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know if you guys read that book when you were in junior high or something like that. I had to read that one. Okay, good. So to recap, institutionalize, groups, institutions, families, like The Godfather, that's a good example. And oftentimes they honor these institutions or they expose the problems in these institutions. You can kind of go either way with that. And oftentimes there's an outsider, someone who like comes into these institutions who isn't really part of the group. And oftentimes the story is told from their perspective so that the audience can have someone to relate to because we're not part of that group either. And it's oftentimes either about them becoming a part of the group or fighting against that group. And sometimes they're often going against the grain. So that was some good examples. The Godfather's like maybe one of the best examples of this. Godfather is an amazing movie. And it really exposes everything about that institution, that particular family institution. Okay, and finally, the superhero. Superhero. Dun, dun, dun. All right, superhero. Who's up?
Okay, that's me.
Nikki, go ahead.
So the superheroes are typically about an extraordinary person who is in an ordinary world, and they try to show what it's like to be misunderstood. And they typically target teens because teens often feel like they are misunderstood. And some like examples of this kind of universe would be like Marvel and DC. And they're like challenged by the mediocre world around them, and they're ultimately trying to get you to sympathize with the character and for you to like sympathize what it's like to be misunderstood, but like you also don't fully understand because you're not a superhero. And yeah, that's pretty much what I said.
Okay, so to recap, individual, this is the exact opposite of Dude with a Problem. Dude with a Problem was ordinary guy, extraordinary circumstance. Bruce Willis, normal guy, blue-collar guy, thrown into building taken over by terrorists. Whereas a superhero is the exact opposite. It's an extraordinary person like Superman who's living in this ordinary world. Okay, and they've got to deal with that. Oftentimes there's a nemesis, like an evil, dark nemesis that matches them in some way, so that there's something for them to fight about, because they're so extraordinary, they need some kind of match to them. So, for example, Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter is presented sympathetically, and he turns out he's this extraordinary guy who was living in this ordinary world, right? The catch with superheroes, so Nikki said DC movies and Marvel movies, and she's right, but not all DC movies and not all Marvel movies are superhero movies from a story structure perspective. So remember, this is about story structure, not about whether or not there's a superhero in the movie. So I want to be really careful with this one, because sometimes students misconstrue what a superhero genre from a writing perspective is, right? And it has to contain all of these little aspects, right? Oftentimes you'll see sequel movies to superhero movies, and they are not superhero movies. They are movies about a superhero, but they're usually a Golden Fleece, or they're a Buddy Love, or they're an Institutionalized, or something else. All right. This is also why oftentimes superhero movie sequels don't do very well, because it's difficult to present your superhero at the beginning of a sequel. It's difficult to present your superhero as someone who's sympathetic. At the beginning of Spider-Man, he's this nerdy guy, right? He's a nerdy guy, and they present him sympathetically. We talked about this in the monomyth lesson, right? So there's Peter Parker, and oh, poor Peter Parker, nobody likes him, and he gets picked on, and Mary Jane won't talk to him, and this and that, and all that kind of stuff, right? And we feel bad for him, and he seems like a normal guy, and we relate to him, and we connect with him because he's presented sympathetically, and then he gains these amazing superpowers, and now he's extraordinary in his world. Well, in the sequel, you can't do that again. You can't throw away all his superpowers and then be like, oh, look, he's a poor nerdy guy and no one will talk to him, because you know that's not true. So the sequel of superhero movies are often not superhero structured movies when it comes to the actual writing and the scaffolding that supports that story. Oftentimes there's something else. They're Dude with a Problem, or they are Golden Fleeces, which are really common. Like a lot of the Harry Potter movies, for example, the first Harry Potter movie is a superhero. The other Harry Potter movies, not so much. Like, go look at the Harry Potter movies and try to analyze their structure, and you're going to find a lot of Golden Fleeces, a team of characters trying to overcome some objective, right? As well as some other different story elements in there. So it's something that it's important to think about. Okay, so what kind of a movie are you making? Okay, so be thinking about your movie. Be thinking about your narrative. What kind of a movie are you going to write? You're all going to pitch something next week. Which one of these 10 genres does your movie fit into? Now, some of you might be thinking to yourself, well, it could be this, or it could be that, or it could be this. That's true. You could tell any story in any of these genres. But one or two of these genres is going to best support the story that you are coming up with. And you need to pick and choose, because it's going to be very difficult for you to have more than one story genre in your story, especially when we're talking about a film your size, 8 to 10 minutes long or so. Like 2-hour films have issues if they try to do more than one genre in one. It gets distracting and people get confused. The film starts out like one kind of movie and ends like a different kind of movie. I could name names, but I won't. Okay? But in your movies, you've got 8 to 10 minutes. You really need to pick one. what kind of a story genre best supports. Because you can do this with any movie. You can tell your movie any number of these ways. But one of these is going to best supply the scaffolding that you need to support the story that you are trying to tell. And then when you pick that, then you can start following the rules of that particular story structure type, and that will help you create a successful story that works and has the payoff that you want it to have in the conclusion, so that the audience feels like it's been resolved at the end. They walk away and say, yeah, that was a good movie. That I feel good. That was a nice, clean start, beginning, and finish, right? So you'd be thinking about what kind of a story you are writing. If we were in class and we still had time, I would have you walk around the room and identify the posters on my walls and tell me what kind of story structure that they are. So your assignment this weekend is, just as you watch TV, as you watch movies, like watch something, take a break, watch something. As you watch the stuff that you're watching, or the stuff that you're reading, whatever it is that you're doing story-wise, I want you to stop and think for a minute and say, what kind of a genre am I watching? Which story structure am I watching right now? So as you flip through channels, or as you look at the movies that you like to watch in your collection, like, start to identify the story structures. Get really good at this. Because the more you identify it, the more you start to realize how these story structures have evolved over time. And that will make you a better writer, and that will make your films much better and widely appreciated by people who can connect to them in different ways. Okay, so be thinking about that. That's your assignment this weekend. There's no formal thing that you have to turn in or anything, but I want you to think about that this weekend. Actively think about it, and think about some of your favorite movies, even your favorite video games, even your favorite books, right? Like, these story genres, they're mostly for movies, but they can apply to other types of stories as well. And then start to identify what kind of a film you think you might be creating. There might be more than one choice, and you're going to have to pick and choose, but which one best supports your particular film. On Tuesday, when I see you next, we will be pitching your ideas. So that's very, very exciting. So we will be pitching your ideas. And I'm looking forward to hearing what it is that you have to show for us. I'm excited to hear what your ideas and what you've come up with. So be prepared. Everyone needs to pitch their own unique idea. We're going to do it over 2 days, but you don't know if you're going to go on Tuesday or Friday. You just don't know. So you need to be prepared on Tuesday. Make sure you have a log line, because you're going to have to tell us your log line. And be prepared. As a reminder, I am grading you based on, do you have a log line? But I'm also grading you based on your preparation, your presentation. Remember, this is your pitch. This is your chance to sell your ideas. No one should be more excited about your idea than you. If you get up there and say, well, my idea is not very good, then why the hell are you wasting my time with it? I've got other stories that I need to hear. Right? A producer will just kick you out of his office immediately, right? I don't want to hear an idea that's not very good, right? So be prepared, be enthusiastic, and remember that I'm also grading you based on your participation. These ideas all get revised, and they all get developed because we help each other and build off of those ideas. When you walk away from your pitch, you're going to have a better idea than what you started with because of the participation. If we don't participate, the ideas don't grow, and we're left with crappy films. And I don't want anyone to have a film that they're not satisfied with. So make sure that you participate. Speak up. You guys are smart people. You have good ideas. You're creative. Each and every one of you has value as far as your ideas and everything else goes, okay? So make sure that you are sharing your ideas and participating in those pitches when we start presenting next week. That is all. I will see you again. That was my lesson on story structure, lesson number 2. We will pick up story structure, lesson number 3 on screenwriting after you pitch next week. And then you'll actually get into writing. You'll begin writing these stories, which is a lot of fun. I will see you on Tuesday. Have a wonderful weekend. It's good to see all of you. I look forward to hearing what you come up with next week.
Stay safe and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.